Hello, I'm James Kipping, Private Client Tax Partner at MHA.
Hi, I'm Victoria Dadswell, Tax Director at MHA. In today's video, we're going to be talking to you about the changes that were announced by the Chancellor in his autumn statement regarding private clients. So, James, the headline grabber from yesterday was clearly around national insurance. What's your opinion on that and how it will affect our clients?
Well, it's been well publicised, hasn't it, that the employees Class 1 rate will reduce by 2% down to 10%, or that's the main rate of Class 1 NI, from January 2024. For the self-employed, Class 2 NIC will be abolished, saving just over £190 per annum for the average self-employed individual. And Class 4 NIC will reduce to 8%. That's a 1% reduction from April 2024. However, despite those cuts being the kind of headline grabbers, fundamentally there's no real tax cut at all. So there's been a lot of talk about the effect of inflation and fiscal drag on the general population, particularly the working population. People being dragged into higher income tax rates by the freezing of the various income tax thresholds for a number of years. And if we just look at some of the numbers, the income tax revenue in the UK increased over the last 12 months by about £45 billion. And if we just consider that the cost of the NI cuts yesterday was something in the region of £10 billion, you can see that year on year, we're expecting tax and NI revenues to continue to increase. One of the fundamental differences in the announcements yesterday was the mid-year change to Class 1 NIC for employees, yet the Class 4 rate for self-employed will only decrease from April 2024. Victoria, do you have any views as to why there might be a mid-year change to Class 1 NI?
Yeah, I'm sure if we were to ask the government, they'd sit here and say, well, it's just due to practicalities, and they'd have brought it in sooner for everybody if they could have, if they want to see more pounds in the pocket for the general population. But, we have to look at the reasoning behind it, and it might be administration, but there might be other reasons behind it. And you do wonder whether it's an indication of them bringing forward an election and they want it earlier in the year, so they want people to have more pound in the pocket sooner, and they're feeling the benefit of that prior to an election. I do think administration certainly is an aspect of it, with Class 1A being administrated through pay-as-you-earn and on a monthly basis. I would say it's a simple case of changing the software. I know many software providers out there, my payroll colleagues won't agree, whereas Class 4 is administered through the self-assessment system, so maybe it's slightly harder. We have seen a change mid-year previously when they brought in the social levy, and that went down like a lead balloon. But obviously they're trying again, and they want to get more pound in the pocket, I'm sure is their argument for that. So, James, I think that probably brings on to talking about the fairness in the tax system and national insurance and why they've chosen that tax rather than others.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, if you look back 18 months or so, I think as you just mentioned, we had a change to the national insurance system where they introduced the social care levy as a 1.25% addition to the normal national insurance rates that ultimately were later abolished. But that, of course, targeted really the working population. And of course, what we've seen yesterday is a complete reversal, actually targeting cuts at only the working population. And I think that probably does go some way to improving fairness, perhaps within the tax system. But there are lots of other things within our tax system that are fundamentally unfair. And perhaps in the run up to an election, it's something that should be looked at.
I think one of the things that we all expected to see yesterday, James, that had been heavily publicised prior to the autumn statement, was around inheritance tax. And obviously there was nothing in any releases afterwards or in the Chancellor's speech. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think I would expect any sort of pledges in relation to inheritance tax to form part of party manifestos ahead of the next election, probably rather, and this is just my personal view, rather than any big announcement in the budget in the spring. If there is to be a big announcement, I expect there'll be some rather bigger changes than were announced in the autumn statement. I would expect them to want to target a wider range of the population. I suppose when thinking about, though, what might those pledges be, you know, there's all manner of things that could be looked at within the inheritance tax regime. Firstly, the rate of inheritance tax is high. You know, 40% is high. Perhaps that causes people to want to plan to avoid it. You know, so would a lower rate of inheritance tax actually ultimately yield more in terms of revenue and perhaps be fairer? Obviously, there's the nil rate band. You know, house prices have grown phenomenally over the last few decades without the nil rate band keeping pace, bringing more estates within the charge to inheritance tax. And then there's the non-domicile regime, which affects actually more than just inheritance tax. It affects income tax, capital gains tax as well. And we know what the Labour Party have said in relation to that regime, that they would abolish it and replace it with a kind of temporary residence regime. What that will look like, we don't know. I think at this stage it's pure speculation. But I think from an inheritance tax perspective, sweeping changes without consultation would probably be a bad move.
Yeah, agreed. And it comes down to the fundamental that you mentioned earlier about fairness in the tax system, and there seems to be real discrepancies at the moment. And we know they tried to consult on inheritance tax in the past few years, haven't they? And it's kind of come to a blank really for them. So it'd be good, certainly from an advisor's point of view, for us as well to have clarity on what that looks like going forward.
Absolutely. I think just to finish off, I think the one thing we do know in relation to inheritance tax is, though, and in fact the non-domicile regime, is that is likely to change, and therefore, you know, people should be considering whether to undertake any planning now, perhaps ahead of the end of this tax year, or certainly before the next election.
Certainly. Thank you very much for listening today. And if you do have any questions regarding any of the matters discussed or anything else indeed around tax, please feel free to contact MHA. And also there's we focused on private client matters in this talk, but there's more information about the autumn statement generally on our website, so please do take a look.